Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Our county commissioner meeting is now called to order at 9:30. If you all stand for the pledge of allegiance, our invocation. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your grace and your mercy and for your love. We thank you for each and every one that is here today, dear Lord, and we thank you for this board. We thank you, dear Lord, for all that you've done in protection of our community. Lord, we ask that you bless this meeting, that we use good wisdom that you've granted to us. And Lord, let us do the best that we can for our community, for our state, and for our country. Bless each and every one. In our Savior's name, amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we would note, in terms of our attendance today, that Mr. Thompson is absent, and so everyone else is present. And also, Commissioner Doherty may have to leave around 10:30 or so for a funeral, and I believe you indicated Mr. Dodds or Mr. Carter. Who was the other? And Mr. Carter. So we're going to, today we were having a public hearing on our ordinance that is here today, and during this time we will be receiving public comments during this, and any questions and comments also from our board. Mr. Cornegay, do you want to say anything as we go into our public hearing in the ordinance?
I really don't have anything to say. We just need to go ahead and open up for public comment.
Okay. At this time, we have public comments from Ms. Carol Mosley.
Carol Mosley, 10121 Southwest 104th Avenue in Graham. Good morning, Commissioners. I was surprised to see the fire assessment resolution on the agenda. I thought it was decided at the last meeting to take a pause and gather more input from the public, perhaps even a public workshop. Instead, here we are trying to push this through so that it can be submitted to the tax collector by September 15th to be implemented with the 2025 tax roll. There are many details to consider. I'll be addressing the details from this pamphlet that we got here. We don't want the devil hiding in the details, so careful consideration is due. According to the study, we need $4,853,205 to fully fund the fire department, excluding EMS. Soon, we'll have another one in Brooker that will require additional funding. By law, government, according to this, government and agricultural land can't be included in the special assessment. What total percent of our land mass is designated as agricultural? Is that Ag 1 and Ag 2? Since Rayonier owns more than 25% of our land mass, all of that is exempt. Will you exempt churches and nonprofits as an option? If so, the loss cannot be made up by the public, but must be covered by other county funds, such as the general fund. Also by law, EMS must be funded elsewhere. You have to discuss with each other publicly what assessment methodology you will use. Per parcel, per square foot, per structure or dwelling? Will it be a flat rate for everyone or a sliding scale according to property assessments? And then rates for different types of property, commercial, residential, vacant. You have to decide if you will seek 100% of the cost from the public or some portion of the total cost. The cost of service assessment puts 100% at $309 for residential. If everyone pays the same, no matter the size or value. And failure to pay results in a lien and possible loss of property. So some mechanism needs to be in place so that the poorest of the poor don't end up homeless. I suggest you post this study to the county website and that you hold a widely publicized public workshop on the matter. And also that you not try to push this through by mid-September. Sufficient time for public discussion among you needs to take place before proposals are put on the table and before resolutions are enacted. I think I saw something in the resolution about how you're going to assess government property, but this says government is excluded, so I'm not sure if what I saw was correct or not. Maybe that will be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's see, we had Mr. Paul Steele.
Paul Still, 14167 Southwest 101st Avenue, Stark. I also would suggest that you postpone this process. It's the agenda for this meeting didn't come out until Friday of last week. I don't know whether this ordinance was ever posted, but obviously people won't know that it was on the agenda for this morning, and you see a fairly empty room here. I think it's something so important that you don't want to proceed down the line only to have a significant legal challenge because you didn't meet the notice requirements. I think you're trying to move way too fast on this. The concept of special assessments I think it's a good one because it allows you to assess people who are using services but are below the level that they have to pay very much property tax. And I'm one of the people that don't pay almost no property tax. I've got 115 acres, it's agriculture, and I pay a couple $100 a year. And live in an old mobile home, a 1978 mobile home. So I think we need to have a mechanism, but the $200 is way too burdensome for people who do not have the money to pay that. I think a $50 assessment would be possibly something that you want to look at. And I hope I can come back during public comments and talk about the budget process and how it's time to look at some other mechanisms for both reducing cost and also raising funds. But on this one, I would urge you to not proceed and try to get this through the process for this year and do a really thorough study of what's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kate Ellison.
Kate Ellison, 971 Southeast 32nd Way, Melrose, Florida, in Bradford County. I didn't know that this was the workshop. I thought we were having a workshop and that a lot of people would be here and have something to say. I support the fire assessment. I think it's essential and the county needs money. I get that, and we want it to be fair. I don't think that, as far as I know, the plan is to assess residents equally. I think that's very wrong, and it should be according to square feet. People who don't have hardly any discretionary income are not going to be able to pay this fee, and they're going to get in trouble, and it's going to cause an uproar. And people like me who have a larger house should be paying for a potential really big fire. I just think that that you need to assess it in a way that addresses the wide variation in the size and expense of houses that we have in our county. I think that it can be done in the time allotted so that we can get it going for next year. But it needs to be fair to all the citizens. And if businesses are paying by the square foot, I think residents should pay by the square foot as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other public comments? I know a few people came in just now. Did we miss anybody's card? Okay. And I guess for me, some of the concerns, when we think about the fire assessment and its cost is based on the assessment that's imposed by what it would cost for anything that would be included with what it takes to have a fire program. And the cost that would be associated with that would be, it's in our resolution that is presented, it lists A through, I think, P, the physical construction of a facility for improvement, the cost associated with any construction, the cost that it would encourage for the acquisition of any property for purchase, the cost for labor, materials, machinery, and all of those things, et cetera. The cost for fuel, the parts, the maintenance, repairs, and utilities, the cost for computer services, processing, communication, the cost for land, interest, the lease, all of those rights associated with it, the cost for indemnity, surety bonds, and so forth, the cost for salaries, volunteer pay, workers' compensation, insurance, employment benefits, cost for uniform, et cetera, the cost for construction plans, specifications, surveys, estimates, and costs, the cost for engineering, financial, legal, and professional services, the cost for compliance with contracts of agreement that may be entered into with for fire services, and all costs associated with structure and the implementation, collections, enforcement, and et cetera. And then all of the costs and expenses necessary for any incidentals associated with it, any reasonable amount of contingencies anticipated for delinquency, and so forth. So the question I would have is where and what areas would be considered municipalities that would be a part of the service of units? And I guess I would need Mr. Carter or our attorney to kind of answer some of those questions for me. It might, everybody else may be clear on those things, but I'm not. And what are the areas of the county that would be considered? Is the city of Stark, Hampton, Brooker, Lodi? Is the city opt out of it? And do we have consent of the affected municipalities that would be affected by our Florida statutes 125.01Q, and whether or not the board is using its authority under the home rule for inclusive of those areas? And then have we identified the geographic areas to be designated for the initial assessment to improve the preliminary rate solution? And if so, what are those areas and what does that include? Then what would be the amount of the fire assessment imposed and how will it be determined? Because the initial proceedings for imposing the fire assessment should be adopted in the initial assessment resolution by the board, that's us, containing a brief and general description of the fire services and the facilities and whatever programs that are provided, and then determining the fire rescue assessment cost to be assessed, describing the method of appropriating the fire assessment cost, and calculating the fire assessment for specific properties. So my question that I need to be answered as a board member is that done, and what are those properties? And then for our clerk's area, do you have a comfortable status in terms of being able to do what the resolution would say? So the question I have maybe for our Chief Carter and then for our legal, I need those answers so that I'm comfortable moving forward with this. Everybody else may be comfortable. I'm not at this time. Can anybody answer any of those for me? Okay.
Not exactly sure what your question was specifically, but I can tell you that as far as participation from other municipalities, I was at the Lodi City Commission meeting last night where they read in and voted 5-0 in favor of the first reading of the ordinance. So they voted it in last night. Hampton, I believe, is also.
Yeah, Hampton's on board.
Okay, so Hampton, Lodi, and Hampton. Brook is not. No Brooker. Okay.
And then the city of Stark is also, they're here, but they've also indicated they will not be participating in the assessment as well.
No Stark. So, so at the moment we have consent from Hampton and Lodi.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And so with the assessment that was presented, with the budget that was presented, that did include staffing for Brooker. So if Brooker's not participating, I would imagine that we would pull the staffing from Brooker. So that will reduce the overall budget as well. So.
Okay. So that first question was, what area? So you defined that for me as the Lord in Hampton at this time. So that answers that. And a part of the geographical areas and boundaries.
And all unincorporated areas as well. So.
And then what would be the amount of the fire assessment opposed based on the change in the geographical areas?
Well, if Brooker's not going to participate, that will have to be reassessed.
So they have not had a meeting.
Right. As far as
they know right now,
right.
they're not, but like
Sure.
I said, they have not had a meeting.
Gotcha. And I think that's just a discussion that needs to happen with the town of Brooker, and we've been working on setting that meeting up to try and meet with them. I think that if they understand that part of that assessment, and Ms. Mosley, concerning your public comment, that does the assessment that's been proposed does include staffing for Brooker. It's not going to be in addition to. And so with that, I think that Brooker may be interested in having, participating in the assessment if they know that's going to get them staffing as well. So.
Okay. Mr. Bradley, I know, and you're our legal expert today. When we look at the defined boundaries now that it's reduced from the other two municipalities that are choosing not to have that mutual agreement, how legally do we move forward with the ordinance if we don't have that clearly defined in the initial?
Well, it sounds like, at least for Brooker, that's an open question. Stark, I can only respond to what I'm hearing, but it sounds like Stark probably is going to not participate. Is Stark included in the boundaries right now?
They're not.
Okay, so what we're talking about then is whether Brooker's included or not. That's a very minor change one way or the other. Today is a first reading. If what you're voting on is whether to have a hearing on first reading, where you would ask me to read by title only, I would read that, and then there would be time between the first hearing and the second hearing. So nothing's being decided today. What you're deciding is whether to keep this question open as you continue to collect information and learn more about these things. So that would not, there's nothing that I've heard that would preclude the board from moving forward if they so choose on a first reading of this ordinance today.
Okay, thank you. And it may be clear to my fellow commissioners, all of these questions, but me as a layperson concerning this assessment process, I needed to have some answers to those questions so that I would feel comfortable. I know in spirit that we must do something, or have some kind of assessment for our fire rescue. That's a given. We have to. We can't continue funding under the same conditions that we have. But what that number ends up being is important. And then, do we have a number for the cost at this time?
So the last numbers, Amanda, do you happen to have those with you? The number that was presented with Ms. Mosley spoke of, the packet that was presented before, is no longer valid because that was with the city of Stark included. So the city of Stark is out, so that takes out their parcel data and as well as their commercial and residential properties.
We don't have it in front of us, Chief.
Okay, so you won't be able to answer that. But so those will be important for me.
Sure.
For me, that's important for me to know moving forward. But I agree that we have to have some type of an assessment. But the number is important so that it would be equitable and that we have a method and a process in which we are assessing each person or property that's going to bear the burden of the cost. And that isn't clear to me.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand that you're not setting an amount for the assessment today.
I understand that piece, but to have some idea, a notion going forward, what that might be.
Right, and we do have some notion because we presented it at the last meeting. It's not going, the final amount will not differ greatly from what you've already seen. So if you recall, the previous numbers we presented at 100% funding, it was approximately $320. At 80% funding, it was approximately $250. Those numbers will not change significantly. So you do have some idea of
Yes,
what it will be.
yes, and I do recall those from the previous one, but we made some changes in terms of who's going in and who's coming out. So then that number could change significantly.
No, ma'am, it
No.
will not.
Well, and I think it's also important to consider that I don't think it's the climate of the board or the citizens based off of what I've heard and seen that it needs to be funded at 100%, right? And I don't know that that was, I don't know that that's what the board wants to do either. So again, if it's $300 was, let's just say use round numbers, $300 was 100% of funding for when Stark was included. If Stark's excluded, and you weren't planning on doing the 100% for them anyway, then the total 100% number is, I don't want to say irrelevant, but if we're not going to fund it at 100% anyway, if you're set on a number instead of a percentage of funding, then that is not going to change. It's just going to let you know how much you're going to be collecting to offset the.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Amanda just found the latest numbers. The at 100%, this excludes the city of Stark, but does include the town of Brooker. So at 100%, it would be $334. At 75%, it would be $251. 50% would be $167, and 25% would be $84.
okay.
And that was my point. I think that people are, and the board may also be looking at funding a number and not necessarily funding a percentage of the department. And so that's where I'm not sure that the actual overall bottom line number is truly that.
Right. And so as you can see from what we just pointed out, it did not vary significantly.
Okay,
$2 or $3 or $4.
okay. And for me, I just needed to know what those boundaries and what municipalities were participating and where the geographical location was, and you helped me to clarify that a little bit. And to the question about the notification, Amanda did place that in the Bradford County Telegraph based on the statute's requirement for the notification timeframe. So it was met in that regard, and I know a lot of people don't get Bradford County Telegraph, but she did do the proper notification in the newspaper for that. Are there any questions from the board? Go ahead.
Yes, as far as like businesses or people that have different structures on their property, who tells us what will be assessed? Is it the property appraiser? Okay, and that's one concern I have is that, has that been looked at? I mean, is it fair to everyone what's being put on there? I mean, have we talked to him about it? Has he played a role in any of this? Is he here?
So Commissioner Andrews, we hired the consultant, Stantec, and that's where they got all of their data from, is the property appraiser. So they've been working in close concert with them from the very beginning of this process that you asked us to
Do we know what do we know what they found? I mean, is it fair, what we're doing, is it fair for everyone?
Well, I mean, that's a policy question for the board to decide. The special assessments is a way of collecting, revenue where you pay for the benefit. In other words, if you have property that, could catch on fire or be possibly subject to EMT, services, then you can receive, then you will receive an assessment. All right. As opposed to ad valorem or property taxes like you get every year with your trim notice, where it's based on the value of the property. So someone who has a higher value in their property under ad valorem pays more than someone whose property is worth less. Whereas in an assessment, it's not based on the value of your property, a special assessment, it's based on the benefit one receives. And whether someone lives in a house that is 2,000 square feet or 2,500 square feet, they both are receiving the benefit of having somebody come to their house if it catches on fire, right? And so those are just, I'm not saying one is right, one is wrong. I'm saying those are just two different ways of collecting revenue by government, right? And this is a different way of collecting revenue by government. It's a very common way of collecting revenue, particularly in the areas of fire. And so that, that's how it's done. That's the philosophy behind it. And there will be those who argue that's the fairest way to do it because you pay for what you use, right? Whether, no matter what your, what the value of your house is, or some would argue it's not a good way to do it and you should just raise their property taxes. Well, that's not always available.
Yes.
Because, that's as a way of collecting revenue, because you maybe, millage, is there's caps on millage and all of these things. So, and, is that fair? Also, I mean, these are philosophical questions, but that's just giving you an overview of things.
Thank you.
Okay. And then it says the appropriation methodology is based upon a methodology determined by the board to provide a fair and reasonable appropriate for the fire assessment costs among the properties that would be impacted. So my position is that we have to come to a consensus on the methodology and what that initial cost would be for properties. Okay. But for today, we're basically, my clarification is to say that we would move forward with an assessment, but not the minute details of those costs.
Well, Madam Chair, understand that this is all in your all in the collective hands of the board. In other words, let's say you move forward today and say, I move to move forward with the first reading of this ordinance by title only, and that passes. And then I would read it. All your options are still in front of you. You could say it's too soon, we're not going to do it this year. You could say we're going to go ahead and move forward at 100%, to use the terminology that was used earlier about percentages of the budget, right? You could say we're going to move forward at 50% or 25% or whatever it is. All your options are still on the table if you did the motion that I described today.
Okay. That clarifies it for me. Any other question by the board?
I just have some comments, if I may. Somebody brought up in the last meeting, somebody in the public brought up about the volunteer fire department and, what happened to the volunteers. Well, we all know that, based on certifications and different things like that, we ended up going to a paid fire department. But when we had a volunteer fire department, and listen, I'm not taking anything away from any of the firefighters that are in here, but when we had a volunteer fire department, I wasn't a volunteer. never had a volunteer show up to my house, but this is the way I imagine things went. If there was a call that went out, somebody had to go to the station and get a truck. And then the respondents, the other volunteers, would show up to that fire. And at that point, typically because of the elapsed time that had gone by, there wasn't a whole lot left. So they were only there really, I don't want to say only, they were there to protect, if anyone was in the home, but also to protect property adjacent to where the fire was. So when we had the volunteer fire department and the county funded fire, it was at a very small amount. I think it was right around $500,000. Does that sound right, Chief? So as we go forward and we talk about an assessment, I see this more of, starting out with a number and then working with that number within that budget rather than saying, here's our budget and this is what we need to fund. And so what does that look like? Does it look like cuts in personnel? Does it look like closures of departments? I mean, again, where's that balance in between? And I think that the responsibility of the board to the citizens is trying to find out what that balance is, rather than coming up with a number and saying, this is what it's going to be, and this is to provide for all of the things that you read off. Are all of those things the things that need to happen? So again, when we talk about Brooker, for instance, having an appropriation for a station out there, it's as I've said to our legislators before, when we get money from our legislation, it seems like it's always money that costs us money rather than money that helps us generate revenue. And when I say that, building a new fire station obviously comes with personnel, equipment, maintenance. Until that building falls in, we own and we have to pay for that building. So again, what does this look like, and how do we provide a service to the citizens that certainly is more responsive than when we had volunteers, but at the same time, it's not, we just can't afford it. There's a lot of things that we can't afford, in our county. I think we were very fortunate when we had the ARPA funds, when we had the chiller unit go out on the courthouse that ran us right around $1 million, we were able to pay for that. If not, we're dipping heavily into our reserves and we're trying to figure out how to pay for it. So, again, I'm not against the ordinance and moving forward and having that discussion. I guess really where I'm looking is more about, what's affordable, what does the department need to provide the basics to be able to provide protection for the citizens of the county.
Any other comments? Just so that you're clear and for the residents, the audience, we understand that we have to have an assessment. Determining that number is another further discussion. And some of the questions that that I'm raising today, I had hoped that we'd have like a town hall so we can ask a million questions and not necessarily in just a quick hearing. So it's not that, in my opinion, trying to just bulldoze something through. But I understand there are timelines in which we have to meet if it's going to be considered for the 25-26 fiscal year. Am I correct on that? So that is why the timing and the dates and having this is important. But making a final decision about it is still rests in the hands of this board. So I'm hoping that we can have more community discussions, hearing more from you on what you feel and suggestions and thoughts about it before we make a final decision on it. So does that make sense?
Well, I mean, and just like she said, we all know we need an assessment. It's how and what we need. And in my opinion, it has to be fair. We have to take a very deep look in who's being charged, what's being charged, and how it's done. If we still have the option of not going forward with this this year, then, I understand what we're doing, but, I have to know that we still have time to look over this and dig in deeper before we do anything.
And I'm hearing you're saying, our attorney, Mr. Bradley, that we do have time, even if we pass this resolution today.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. I think a couple of things. You were right on point when you said that there are certain legal requirements that you're required to comply with if you were to do it for the next fiscal year, right?
Right.
And this is one of those. And so what you're basically voting on today is to keep the conversation going, for lack of a better way to put it. If you want to keep the conversation going, you're welcome to have whatever hearings you want to have, any discussions you want to have. There is no final decision made. If you were to adopt a motion to approve this on first reading and to ask me to read it by title only, that would be the motion. Then that would be the effect of it.
Okay. All right. Everybody clear?
I have another comment. So looking at this at 25% at $84 a year, that's roughly, $7 a month. That's really, when we were pushing for the franchise fee, I think that's a kind of the number it was going to land on, that we thought that was going to be the best option at the time. So
It was,
again,
and that would have generated, if I remember, yes, right around $600,000
right.
at $7 a month.
Okay. So again, moving forward, because even at $84, there's adjacent counties to us that I don't think even pay that much, or when they first implemented their fire tax,
Right. And
quite about that amount. So, and still able to provide adequate fire protection in some cases, even larger areas. So,
and bear in mind that franchise fee would only have been levied on FP&L customers, not all property owners.
so correct. But had it gone through with Clay, I think that was about a number that we landed on, where it ended up being, it was going to be roughly around, I think $7-8
Yes.
per
Well,
customer.
that was FPL's number, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And we, as a board, can make that decision about those numbers. I'm comfortable with that. But I do want us to have more discussion, excuse me, more discussion with our citizen on their concerns. Okay. With that, I will ask, is there anything further? Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, if you want to move forward, I articulated the motion, so
Okay.
you could just ask for a motion.
All right. Okay. We'll ask for a motion and you can articulate further on it.
I stated it would be to approve the ordinance on first reading and direct me to read the ordinance by title only. And then if a majority of you vote for that, then I'll read it by title only.
So-
And we'll be done with this part of the meeting, but everything still remains open, just like I described.
Okay.
So the next action on your part, Madam
Is
Chairman, will be
ask for a
call for a
motion.
motion. Yeah.
For motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance, to have further discussion and look at the different rates at the different structures at 100%, 75%, 50%, and 25%.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Doherty. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Reddick. All in favor? Any questions, discussion? All in favor by the sign aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's before O, and note that.
And I will read the ordinance now by title only. An ordinance of Bradford County, Florida, relating to the provision and funding of fire rescue services and facilities, authorizing the imposition and collection of non-ad valorem special assessments against real property specially benefited by the provision of such services and facilities established by the county hereunder, providing certain definitions, establishing the procedures for imposing, collecting, and administering fire rescue assessments, providing that fire rescue assessments constitute a lien on assessed property equal in rank and dignity with the liens of all state, county, district, or municipal taxes and assessments and superior in dignity to all the prior liens, mortgages, titles, claims, providing for severability and providing an effective date. Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. At this time, are there, any further public comments?
Madam Chair, if I could please ask that we allow Chief Carter to come up and make his presentation so he
Oh,
can leave.
Yes. Thank you, Chief Carter. Okay, we'll let Chief Carter come. They have to leave for a funeral.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you allowing me to do that this morning. Let me get my presentation pulled up there. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to ask if Chief Rogers will actually come up, and he's been working closely with Lieutenant Weeks, who is unfortunately sick this morning. Otherwise, he'd be delivering this update. So we will go through this, and then I'll have some information for you.
Morning. So, like Chief Carter said, Lieutenant Weeks is unable to be here, and so I'm going to give this program update on behalf of him. So, if you'll go to the next slide. Oh, there we are. So, we were going to have Miss Smith come and also give a testimonial. She was one of our first identified patients through a referral through our line personnel. She's also unable to be here today. So, we'll go to a financial update. Next slide, please. This just kind of gives you an outline of so far what we've spent money on. And the reporting process, every month we have to report to LSF, who manages this project, manages these funds. So all the funds that are spent have to be approved by them monthly. And anytime you guys need or want to see line by line those expenditures, just let us know, we can get you that. But this is a kind of a breakdown of marketing, equipment, and training, where these funds have went so far. Okay, next slide. So our 5-month plan, excuse me, May, we really focused on building the program, trying to get our program needs identified and identify some strategies. June, we started to get materials out, such as a Narcan kit. This is what this is here. So there's 2 doses of Narcan in there, some literature. July, as we move through this coming month, we're gonna strive to implement Narcan cabinets. I'll speak about that in a few slides. In August, we're gonna try to partner with a tele 911 service to the citizens of the county. What that does is that essentially will bridge a gap. If Lieutenant Weeks is out on a house call and that patient needs something specific, tele 911 is a no cost to our department or the county that provides, let's just say the patient needs something specific. These physicians can work with that patient, call whatever they need in, and prevent a trip to the ER. And then September, we're going to then reevaluate the past 6 months, see what is working, what is not working, and make adjustments accordingly. Next slide, please. So some of our statistics, so far we've been able to give out 36 doses or Narcan boxes. You may hear Narcan, naloxone used interchangeably, but we work with what's called the HEROES program through the Florida Department of Health to get this Narcan for free. And so far we've distributed 36 of these boxes to different people who are opioid users. Within the program right now, Lieutenant Weeks is following actively on a daily basis 7 different patients that are opioid users. So daily or every other day, he's following up with these people, make sure they don't have any relapses, any needs specifically to opioid and their problems that they're facing. Outside of that, we've had 28 different unique mobile integrated health visits. This is apart and separate from those 7 patients. I'm going to talk about what those 28 visits look like. And a lot of these referrals are coming from our people. So the line personnel who are out there responding to calls every day, they may notice that this person may benefit from this program and send in a referral to Lieutenant Weeks. Next slide, please. So the unique mobile integrated health visits, these are those patients not enrolled into the program, but can benefit from some assistance from Lieutenant Weeks in this program. 4 different examples that he had listed here was planning for the storm season, the hurricane season's coming up, medication reconciliation, medical equipment, and wound care. Those are some of the things that he's been able to do so far and prevent admission into the hospital or at an ambulance transport. The medication reconciliation is kind of one that stuck out to me. This patient who was able to be seen by Lieutenant Weeks was continually taking an opioid medication after the physician had canceled and discontinued that medication. So we were able to get that out of their regimen that they were taking every day. Next slide, please. So opioid abatement measures specifically, like I said, we have these free naloxone or Narcan kits that we have made. There's literature education in there, as well as fentanyl test strips. We've been able to give quite a few of these out, whether it be at the community hubs or patient encounters. We have found this to be a pretty useful tool so far. In coordination with the Hanley Foundation, which was something that the Florida or the local health department actually brought to our attention, we're going to be strategically placing Narcan cabinets all through the county. So we're in the process of identifying, strategic places in which we think that this may be beneficial to the public, and have a slide also of what that will look like. And then public education, whether it be festivals, again, the community hubs, we strive to be at every one of those, Hampton, Lottie, to provide any information that we can regarding our program. Next slide, please. And so this is what a Narcan cabinet looks like. Like I said, the local health department tipped us off to the Hanley Foundation. I was hopeful to have one of these to show you today, and hopeful to get those up and installed by next week. Next slide, please. And then this is the Narcan or naloxone kits that I spoke about. Kind of gives just a more in-depth dive into what is in these kits. And that's it.
Okay.
You guys have any questions?
Yes,
specifically?
Chief Carter, and for you, I know that you mentioned that you have the 7 patients. So would, out of these 7, this one wound care, when you were saying that you were having to try to reduce those calls, so is the wound care for the person that's on opioid?
The wound care is separate from that. So those are that patient would fall on that unique visit. But the 7 patients listed there are all opioid users.
Okay, and then have you made a connection, I don't see, with the sheriff department for those patients that are in the jail? Have you made a connection to treat those
Yes, ma'am.
persons?
We actually met with Colonel Smith and Major McKinley from the jail staff, and working to kind of form some type of program for these patients when they're incarcerated, and then when they're discharged from the jail. Clay County has a pretty robust program. Their community paramedic program partners with their jail in Clay County, and so we're looking to try to do something similar with our people here in our jail. Whether it be when you get released from jail, we give you a Narcan kit or whatever that looks like. But those conversations are being had already.
And 2 last questions are the Narcan kits at all of the hubs, the 3 hubs that we have.
Yes, ma'am.
And then
And we have personnel there too. We send Lieutenant Weeks to all of those.
all right. And then how much of your budget have you spent so far?
So roughly we're about 150,000, but that's not including salary dollars of Lieutenant Weeks that comes out of that fund.
Those
All
are
right.
all my questions. Anybody else?
Yes.
Thank
With starting this up, have you found that it has been able to help with the calls, the rescue units going out? And can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that? Because I
Sure,
think that
sure.
was the purpose of it, correct?
Absolutely, right. So that's one of our focuses. Patient number one, for example, was calling EMS about twice a day. We were sending units twice a day to this person who was in distress, and we were able to, once we enrolled him into the program, drastically cut down on his utilization of EMS. In fact, Lieutenant Weeks, one night at about 3 o'clock in the morning, instead of that person calling for an ambulance, he was able to call Lieutenant Weeks. Lieutenant Weeks went out to his house, and that mitigated an actual response. So since that particular patient was enrolled into the program, he has only had to call EMS one time since being enrolled. So there is a reduction in services being used from an emergent response.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick comment, and this relates to a conversation I had with a family member of someone that was having opioid addiction, and asking that person, because a lot of times, these programs are put together by, people in government that are trying to figure out how to do something that they don't have the same life experiences that some of these folks do. So is there an effort to also counsel and assist the families that are dealing with that? Because there's a large percentage of our repeat offenders, and you can only be helped if you want to be helped.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of families that struggle with how do they cope with it, and how do they move forward, and recognizing signs that that are, whether it's danger to themselves or danger to the family itself. So again, that's just a comment real quick. I just want to leave with that, because as you're going through the program, just keep those caregivers and families in mind.
Yeah, no doubt. That patient number one I spoke about, his mother, he had been a user since he was 17, and he's now late 30s, and she's kind of was at her wit's end. But when she heard about this program, she just lit up. I was there at their house, and she has been almost in contact with us as much as he has. Just very thankful for the program. So
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think this is an appropriate time to clear up some misinformation that has been put out in the community. I keep hearing regarding the funding that it's a grant funding, which is blatantly false.
Yeah, okay.
This is not grant funding. This is settlement funds from a class action lawsuit against Big Pharma for opioid abatement.
Absolutely.
So to clear up any misunderstanding for the record, this is not grant money. This is settlement money.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
And also, it's important to remember as well, we were told initially that the money for this budget year could not be rolled over to next year. So we were in a mad dash to get this money spent to help these patients. So we have gone through quite a bit of that budget already this year. And so that was, again, in an effort to get that done by the end of the state fiscal year, so by the end of June. Which fortunately we've learned that money does roll over, and we are rolling money over into next fiscal year also. I wish Miss Cheryl could have been here this morning. You may recognize her picture earlier. She's the one on the billboard that has become a bit controversial, but she's one of our first patients, and she's a huge advocate for the program. And she is a patient, like you were just talking about, that we've reduced the calls to her significantly. And I know she wouldn't mind me saying that this morning. She was planning on saying that when she was here to speak, but that just goes to show you that this program is making an impact on these people, and it's making a difference out there in the community. And we're looking forward to, strengthening those partnerships with the sheriff's office and other health department and other agencies as well. So I wanted to give you a quick update. I feel like it's something that the county manager and I have talked about giving you a monthly update as far as what the fire rescue service is doing. And when we're talking about the fire assessment and the need for fire department and EMS, I think it's important that you all and the citizens know what all our fire department and EMS does. So just to give you a brief overview, next slide, please. We had 648 fire responses and 590 EMS responses, and this is just for the month of June. This is just the last 30 days. And you'll see that a lot of these numbers overlap, right? The fire numbers also overlap with the EMS data because they run out with the EMS crews as well. We do that for multiple reasons, but a lot of the times our dispatch information may not be correct. The information that the caller gives to our dispatchers sometimes is not correct. So, a lot of times we send more than what is needed, and that's just that's the nature of our business. And, it's much easier to have, and much better for patients to have more help there, and be able to cancel that help once the first unit arrives on scene if they're not needed. But we do send, for most calls, we send a fire and EMS response. And, unless it's something like stub toe or abdominal pain or something that's not a life-saving critical situation, that's when we'll just send an EMS unit only. But and you'll see that the fire responses are actually more than the EMS responses, and that is due to the fact that, as all of you, I believe, have witnessed, there are days that we don't have ambulances to send to calls, and so those fire trucks are the ones that are responding out to those calls and stabilizing those patients. They're all paramedics. They're all, ALS certified on those fire trucks. They have the same equipment that every ambulance has, except for the ability to transport somebody to the hospital. So when they get there, they're able to provide that service. So while they're waiting on an ambulance to get there, they're doing life-saving measures. They're able to stabilize a patient before somebody gets there with a transport. And those other transports may be coming from Clay County or Union County or other mutual aid. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So for our EMS data, we had 477 actual 911 EMS calls. We had 113 interfacility transfers out of the Stark Hospital here. We intubated 6 patients over the last month, which is where we put a breathing tube down their throat and take over their airway, which, again, more than one a week. And we had 2 cardiac arrests, which means their heart stopped beating. So we had two cardiac arrests last month as well. Next slide, please. Over the month of June, we had 3 structure fires. We had 5 vehicle fires. We had 15 brush fires, and we evaluated 36 patients from motor vehicle crashes. And that is my June report for you. I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have. Or
Yes, Chief Carter, if you would, for the board, or if maybe the others don't want, but any of the reports that you have, like with the opiate abatement updates, if you can provide a copy of those reports for the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and we appreciate that. Okay.
All right.
Any questions?
No, just a comment. I just want to thank you for doing this. When we talk about the assessment, we talk about, it's very easy for people to say, you got too many. You don't need that many firefighters. When you look at these numbers are very real. I've stood in front of their board and looked and hoped that no one called because they were down to their last unit. We've had people whose family member they thought was dead. They started CPR, and thank God was able to bring them back. But there was no rescue to send. That's a real hard thing for us to live with when it's our family on the floor fighting for their life. And the job you do is amazing. And we have to have fire and rescue for public safety. And it's just something that is amazing to me that they get done everything they do. If you've never seen them at one of these fires, it's just what they breathe in when they're trying to rest is unbelievable. They do an awesome job and a huge job. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you. And it's certainly not me. It is the men and women out there, boots
Yeah.
on the ground. But I appreciate those comments. Thank you.
Okay. Any other,
Sir.
Commissioner Reddick?
Yeah, could you also please put this and the other presentation on the website, either on the county new website or on your website?
Sure. On our new website, that will be a monthly. People will be able to go on there, and it'll have a running monthly total,
Okay.
and so they'll be able to see exactly real time data. How many calls we've run, kind of the breakdown of what that looks like as well.
Right. Thanks.
All right.
And just, and I appreciate all that our rescue does as well. But I do have one question. If there's a call, is there coordination between the municipalities and whomever is going to disperse out the emergency person or vehicle or whatever? So maybe you have if there's such a thing, a quote, minor situation, but you might end up with everybody at that site. Is there any way, is there some type of coordination so that there's not an overkill,
Resource management
Yeah.
is what you're looking for. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. And we do. We coordinate. We have a great relationship with the city of Stark and Stark Fire Rescue. We have a mutual aid agreement with their automatic aid agreement with them. We respond with them frequently. If they get there and they see, hey, let's say we get dispatched to a vehicle crash inside the city, or a structure fire inside the city, right? So they send their truck, we send our trucks, and they get there and say, hey, we only need one truck, or we don't need any trucks. They can handle it themselves, and so they will cancel us. And we have 2 daily supervisors, one for the EMS division and one for the fire division, that also manage resources throughout the day. So that is their job, is they allocate different resources to different calls. If it's something that, and our crews are very good about, if an engine crew gets there and they see it's only a lift assist, they'll handle that call. They'll send the medic unit, keep them back in service.
Okay.
And I think that's what people misunderstand also about the fire department, is it's not just fires, it's not just vehicle crashes. They're trained to the same level as everybody on that ambulance, except for the fact they just can't transport.
Thank you. Because sometimes I worry if doesn't seem to be really major, but they have everybody. And I say, well, if there's a call on the other end of the county, they're going to be in trouble.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, we definitely do our best at managing resources.
But thank you for all that you all do.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to answer any questions, if the chair allows it. But
I'll allow it, but we're going to schedule. Go ahead and have.
So every day we have 16 personnel on, and that's throughout the county. So we have a station in Lottie, a station in Theresa, the station in Speedville, and then we have the station here in Stark and one in Sampson City. And so Sampson City, Stark, Lottie, and Theresa all have EMS units. That's our 4 EMS units throughout the day. Those are 24-hour transport units. And then we have a fire apparatus at Sampson City, Lottie, and Theresa. Now that currently the fire apparatus in Theresa goes down to the Speedville station during the day. So during day hours, 11 o'clock, they report down to the Speedville station because there's no living quarters down there currently. Once those living quarters are finished, the fire crew will move down there permanently, but the EMS crew will stay in Theresa. And our goal with that is to spread resources out, throughout the county. Our EMS personnel currently are not all dual certified. So on our ambulances, we do have paramedics who are just single cert paramedics. They do not have their fire standards. We're working towards everyone, getting their fire standards. However, that's a lengthy process. We were, EMS only since 1983 or 1987. So they were grandfathered in, and we are again working towards that. But so there may be days on an ambulance where you have someone who is dual certified. You may have somebody who's a firefighter paramedic or a firefighter EMT who's working on an ambulance as well. So at minimum, we have 6 firefighters and 1 fire supervisor every single day. So 7 firefighters guaranteed every single day. And then again, you may have more depending on with the level of certification on the ambulances, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Chief Carter.
You're welcome.
Okay. And then we're going to go back, and Dr. Steele had in the public comments. We'll come back to you. And let the record show that Commissioner Doherty had to leave, and so we have the 3 board members.
Paul Steele, 14167 Southwest 101st Avenue. I wanted to expand on my card because I got an email about 20 minutes ago with some information about removing plants that are blocking the flow out of Lake Sampson. I learned of a different technique that's available from Fish and Wildlife Commission. I contacted the contractor who does that work, and he felt he could do the work for somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. I would urge you to urge the manager to see if that funds could not be found within the Bradford County budget, so that work could be done immediately or as soon as you can get a contract to remove the risk of flooding around Lake Sampson and Crosby. What I wanted to speak with you initially about is the budget process. And I'd urge you to really take a hard look at the budget to see where you can develop some efficiencies. And there's several points come out that I see as potential areas. One is solid waste management. We have an awful lot of rural collection centers, and they're open for long periods of time. And I've never had to wait more than one person or two persons to dump my garbage. And I very seldom, often when I go by them, there's nobody there. So one way of reducing costs in the solid waste area would be to eliminate some of the collection centers and reduce the hours. One of the, you're covering that cost now with the solid waste assessment, but if you can reduce that cost, you potentially could reduce the solid waste assessment, and it wouldn't be so burdensome then to have an additional fire assessment. Also, just simply looking at other efficiencies, like it's interesting that you send out a big fire truck with an ambulance. Why not send out a small vehicle that has all the equipment on it? That leaves the fire truck that is expensive to keep up and sitting at the station, that a small vehicle goes to support the EMS people. And in general, these are the kinds of things I think you should be looking at, is how we can reduce some of our costs. And maybe you go in like you did several years ago and you ask everybody to reduce their costs 10%. And from the standpoint of Bradford Soil and Water Conservation District, I'd be glad to try to work to reduce that budget by 10% if everybody is asked to do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now we're at our approval for our consent agenda. Ask for a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Reddick, second by Commissioner Andrews. Any further discussion, questions? All in favor by the sign aye.
Aye.
3-0. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Item 5, our State of Florida Division of Emergency Management 2023 statewide mutual aid agreement.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. Always good to see you. So this is an update of something that happens periodically. I know it's the 2023, and you're probably wondering about that, but that's when the process was started. It's now come down to the point it's time for the counties to get involved. So statewide mutual aid agreement, Bradford County has previously been in it. As the emergency management director, I want to encourage you to let's remain in that. What it does is it's kind of twofold. First and foremost, it allows us to get help when we need it. It provides that process when we are in a disaster and we need to bring in mutual aid. It's the venue through which we do that with our other counties and municipalities around the state. The second thing is, this is what makes us eligible for reimbursement if we send anyone. So on your end, any board departments who may deploy to other counties after declared disaster to assist in response and recovery efforts, it is the mechanism that makes that reimbursement eligible. So should you decide to do that, it would be a MOU that we are a participating party on. And then once you make that decision, I would bring you back a resolution
get that turned into the state and continue to be a part of that.
Okay, and I would certainly like for you to move forward with that.
Because I believe we had it on as an action item, so what we would look for would be a motion and a vote by the board to,
Well, we're just giving consensus to move forward it, and then we'd bring it for, up for vote because it's on here today we will take action on it.
yeah, so I actually have the agreement
Okay,
to sign, and then I'd bring
Okay.
you back a resolution. on what-
okay,
what
so we'll ask for a motion for, approval.
I make said motion.
A motion by Commissioner Andrews, is there a second by Commissioner Reddick? Further question? All in favor to sign aye?
Aye.
Aye, 3-0.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to skip on down to item 7. Okay. Oh, good morning.
I think, yeah, it will be on the screen, but I have a copy.
Okay. I know you, Mr. Taylor.
I am.
Thank you for being here.
I'm an attorney with the Krisner Group, and I work with FACT, and so the reason that I'm here is to talk to you about kind of the pros and cons of performance evaluations. My understanding, kind of with talking with Denise Vogel's gang from FACT, and then also with your county manager, is that there's kind of a concern right now about how to proceed regarding employee evaluations and the best way to make sure that's happening. And to be fair, probably about, I would say, 8-10 years ago, there were a great number of even Fortune 500 companies that were moving away from performance evaluations. There's still a fair number of organizations that don't use kind of what are called annual performance evaluations, like once a year, to try and establish how people receive increases, how people are evaluated in their job performance on a regular basis. And there are a lot of reasons why that happens. And on the information here on the sheet and also on the screen, you see both kind of, we'll go through some of these things, but what I wanted to emphasize ultimately is there is a lot of discretion in how an employer deals with these issues and how they evaluate their performance, how they communicate their expectations. But what really is most important, and I do this with all my training, at the very top, I kind of have emphasized the other CDC, and that's something I just made up because we were hearing the CDC during COVID all the time. And so I came up with my own terms for this because I think it's pretty important regardless of whether you use an evaluation system or not, and that's making sure that we're using communication, documentation, and consistency. If nothing else, we need to make sure those things are happening because we have to be able to make sure that we are expressing to the employees what it is they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing it and when they're supposed to be doing it. We have to make sure that we're documenting when the things are happening well and when there's not. And then also, because the consistency is important, we have to make sure that we have that information going forward. So it's certainly not something where the county is by law required to conduct performance evaluations in terms of the standard, what we think of that annual process. And what I'll do is I'll start with kind of some of the cons related to that, because the fact of the matter is there's a real need for people that are going to be doing these evaluations to really understand what they're doing. So there has to be training for supervisors and managers if you're going to have performance evaluations, kind of formal evaluation process. They need to understand kind of that it has to be done honestly, it has to be done fairly, it has to be done consistently. These are things that have to occur. And where we see some of the pitfalls are typically where, for example, particularly in a smaller employer or a smaller employee base, you have people that are friends. And it's not too difficult to say, well, I don't want to offend my friend, and so I'm going to give them a better evaluation. Or, I really don't want to I don't want to discourage someone, so I'm going to give them a rating that's higher than what they should be getting. The fact of the matter is, these documents, both in terms of when we're talking about an annual performance evaluation, on the one hand, they do help in terms of people understanding what they should or shouldn't be doing. But on the other hand, if these documents are not accurate, if they're not consistent, if they're not properly completed, we run into the risk of that these documents will be used against us. Because what we deal with typically, and I gave you my name, but I've been practicing employment litigation now for 20 plus years. The fact of the matter is, a lot of it is related to perception. And so when we have these documents and they're not properly completed, they don't have the accurate information, they may be kind of inflated for different reasons, or people are just kind of filling them out because they don't have time, the documents will be used against us if there's a claim that the action taken, whether it's a demotion, whether somebody didn't get a particular position, or whether it's a termination, they'll be used against us because they'll say, well, you gave this person a 5 out of 5. How is it that they were then terminated 4 months later? So they can, if they're not done correctly, have a real issue there. The other thing is and one of the reasons why people started to move away from them is much like, those cones that we see on the sidewalk that we walk by every day, we start to not see them anymore. So it's real easy to kind of, oh yeah, that particular area has been roped off forever, and I don't even notice that the cones are there or the warnings are there. Kind of like that. Performance evaluations, if they're just done rote, if they're done in a way that is really something that people aren't paying attention to, there's a lot of blindness to them. The supervisors don't really fill them out the proper way. The employees don't see them as anything other than, oh great, now I got to go meet with my supervisor and talk about the things that I might be doing well or not. So they tend to come sometimes on an annual basis, have less meaning because they're not really accomplishing the things that we like. As I said before, it's kind of item C there on the cons. They can create those credibility issues if we're dealing with claims. They may create the situation where people aren't really understanding how the performance evaluation meshes with our decision later on to take a negative action against an employee. And the other thing they tend to do is they create an expectation that there's going to be a wage increase. Just because I'm evaluated means that automatically I'm going to get a raise. If we're not communicating very clearly about, look, this is solely a performance evaluation, there's always this idea that the performance evaluation will be accompanied by a raise. Now, there are some, I don't want to just vilify them because there are some good things that come out of them, but they have to be done correctly. And when they're properly done, they do provide an effective measure of kind of how the employee is doing, what their particular skills are, the things they need to improve, what items that are of kind of less significant or immediate concern. The fact of the matter is, though, is that a performance evaluation should never be a surprise. So what should be happening, regardless of whether you're using a formal performance process or not, is that there is that regular communication. And when that communication is happening, there's also documentation. And to be fair, when they are done well, they kind of they document the employee's efforts to do well. But to be fair, at the same time, there are other ways that can be done. It doesn't have to be done once a year in a meeting where things may or may not be remembered at that time. And then one of the other things that can kind of help when we think about, as an organization, the county trying to say, here are the things we need to accomplish over the next year, a performance evaluation with particular goals for each employee helps us kind of eat that elephant one bite at a time. Instead of a monumental task, we're able to kind of break it down and say, okay, here are the things that we need to do, and department by department, here are the things the employees need to do. But again, one of the key parts of that is making sure that it's done properly. So it does require a fair amount of training. It does require a fair amount of understanding as to what the document is going to do. It requires kind of a process in and of itself. And sometimes, speaking again to that con of it being a once-a-year process, it can be ignored. And it may not be as effective or meaningful to either the employee or the supervisor going forward. So with that, I'll stop. I'm an attorney, so I can talk for hours. My kids will tell you that. So
Mr. Taylor, thank you for your presentation. And having come from state government work background, we had performance evaluations annually, but in between that, you have when you're at your quarter, you got feedback from their supervisor, and then at the 6 months, a mid-year evaluation, so that you had feedback continually throughout the year and not just at the end of the 12 months where you're getting a final and getting surprised. So you can develop some specific objectives so that you take all of the emotions out of it. It's not because you're my friend. I expect you to have all of your training, your 12 trainings this year. So whether we're friends or not, did you meet that objective? You were expected to complete your assignment by a certain time. Did you either did or you didn't? So it takes that subjected out to see if that person meet those requirements. So it's a way in which it can be done that is specific. You're following your position description. You're following the specific objectives of your duties, and so that you can take that emotional piece out of it. And because it seems every individual need to know what their job is and have a specific evaluation process so that they get that feedback and not necessarily tied into a raise, but giving that person ongoing feedback on their performance. And all departments need to have performance objectives for that department. What are the goals that each department is trying to reach, and that your employees under you have some specific duties and responsibilities to meet that department goal. So helping the people to understand that what everybody's job is helps the department to meet that goal. So it's important to have employee performance standards in place.
Well, I completely agree. And it starts, but it does start from the idea, and you mentioned the job description. I mean, all of this kind of builds upon each other. You know, when we and communication is one of the biggest parts, because sometimes performance is not, poor performance is not always, well, this person just doesn't want to do their job. Sometimes it's an issue of the leader saying, listen, I've not communicated this well as to the things that are going to be done. Or at other times it's an issue of the job's changed, and we have to make sure that the communication is occurring. How do we communicate with employees? The employee handbook is kind of the big way that we do that. That it kind of allows people to be able at their convenience to be able to say, okay, this is what's expected of me just as an employee. But you're right, the next level is the job description. As far as the job description saying, for this position, this particular position, these are the things I expect to have happen in your role. When it comes to the evaluation process, I think there's value sometimes in there being an annual performance type of process, but there are times where it can create as much negative as positive if it's not being done correctly. And that's why sometimes the better process may be to have the periodic sort of check-in. Sometimes it can be a one-on-one, sometimes it can be meetings on a quarterly basis, as you've described. But where people have moved away from kind of an annual performance evaluation is because of sometimes one other thing that they sometimes deal with is what's called recency bias, meaning the most recent thing is the thing that's brought up because that's what people remember. So I think you're right. I agree that there needs to be, absent a particular formal annual evaluation process, we do need to have some communication about the expectations and how we're going about fulfilling the goals of each department.
Right. And because over time, those objectives may change, the direction in which the department is headed. So sometimes those performance objectives have to change because the situation changes. So that would be important. But the training is important, and the supervision is more important. Yeah. Any questions from the board?
Just comment. I totally agree. I think that, and like you were talking about, this process not only teaches the employee what is expected of them, but for poor leaders, like you were describing, the ones who cannot be objective and do their job, whenever there's a problem, because even if you're my friend, I have an obligation to do my job and do it correctly. That's what the public always refers to as the good old boy system. With my buddy, if it's my buddy, then they don't have to work. They don't have to do the same job that everyone else does. And that leads into a lot of problems when you operate under that situation. And with the performance evaluation, there are some leaders who have never sat down in a room with their employee and had a talk. When you have a performance evaluation at least once a year, you come into a room, you sit down with them, and you talk about each one of these things. You tell them, you know, you're doing a great job here. Maybe we could improve on this. But it gives them guidance and direction. It also helps with your relationship with them as you are talking to them one-on-one. Sometimes we have problem employees that leaders will not talk to and put the problem off with someone else to handle because they don't want to deal with it themselves. That's a poor leader. And they need to step up and do their job. When you have this, then whenever you are talking to those problem employees, you're talking to them about what's going on. And it's, you know, we can delegate a lot of things, but we can't delegate our responsibility. We have to do our job. And I did come from state government where we did this for many, many, many years. I never received a raise, but that yearly performance evaluation was very important to me because it also had a section there for comments from my supervisor. And those comments meant as much as a raise did to me because it told me either I was a valued employee or I was not. And so I strongly recommend that we have this. And yes, sometimes employees are good employees and something happens and they start calling in and not coming. But there again, it gives us an opportunity to sit down with them and ask, what's going on? Is there anything we can do? I think it keeps us in touch with our employees and builds a stronger workforce because of the relationship that you have with them.
And then another piece too is that evaluation is not just a one-way street, but it's also getting feedback from that employee on how they think they're doing. And then there may be something that the supervisor forgot, you know, they have done some extra thing. I'm covered for another department. So it also allows the employee to give, you know, some assessment of how well they think they've done. And so you allow that in the evaluation process as well. But throughout the course of the year, that you're giving feedback to that person, and that person is also keeping some documentation of these extra things that they may be doing as well. So it's important to have a process in place for them.
And I would certainly, it done completely by the book, it can be an advantage. But even the thing is, even if you have a formal annual evaluation process, if we're waiting until that 12-month period to raise those issues, that's going to be a problem.
I agree.
And I've had a number of cases where I've defended, including state agencies, where I will get annual evaluations that put someone at 5 out of 5 for the past 10 years, and they've been terminated, within the 3 months after their performance evaluation. Those evaluations, because they've not been completed correctly, people haven't paid attention, people haven't done the things they should, then create this very big credibility issue for an employer to say, well, we've dealt with this all this time. Why wasn't it in any of these evaluations? So there are, I think certainly there's an importance to making sure that feedback is getting through, but the question becomes what is the best way to ensure that that's occurring? For some organizations, it might be the annual evaluation, and it's not just an issue of laziness or people being, favoritism. We have new supervisors all the time too, and they've come up to this, and to be fair, I get a lot of pushback from supervisors about annual evaluations because it takes so much time as well. I'm having to spend the whole day going through evaluations, so I've got 16 other things. So I'm not saying that they're not important. They are, and they can be used effectively, but it really is a balancing act for any employer to decide what is the best way for me to ensure that that communication is occurring, because that's going to be the first part that's going to be most important, that the documentation is there for us to be able to then go back. Because at the end of the day, if the employee's not performing well and we're talking to them about it, talk's great. Hopefully the employee's listening, But later on, when I've taken plenty of depositions where I go to depose the plaintiff, and I've learned from the employer that they've talked to this employee about umpteen dozen times about, could be a tardiness or attendance or something else. And I go to depose the plaintiff, and they say, never heard anything about it, because nothing was documented. So it's important to make sure that in the balancing act of developing the appropriate way to do this, you kind of look at what the county's prepared to do in terms of effective training, who needs to be trained, how you do that, and then which system is really going to get the most use and effectiveness of the supervisors. And sometimes it's just a matter of making sure that they understand the importance of what they're doing as well.
So I concur.
May I just-
Yes, Commissioner Reddick.
And I agree with what you're saying. I think the performance evaluations are becoming a thing of the past, because I feel like our supervisors are with their employees every day. They see them all the time. They talk to them. If there's a problem, like you said, they can just call them in one-on-one and say, hey, look, you've been late 2 times this week. Let's tighten it up. But it also takes, like you said, it has to be documented. It has to be documented. And, and the other thing I have a real problem with the performance evaluations, if you call in somebody for a performance evaluation, they just don't want to attaboy, and then you send them out the door. You tell them, yeah, you're doing a great job. Everything you're doing spot on. I wish I had more employees like you. Attaboy, and you send them out the door. That's, I just, that's not the way to do things. But just in my opinion. And I've been listening to what you've been saying, and there seems to be problems with that too, because they're expecting, if they're really performing, they're expecting something after their evaluation. So, I think that our supervisors should, again, stay in constant contact with their employees, whether it's good or bad. And rather than just calling them in once a year, because I can see from listening to what you're saying, that could definitely come back to bite you, So,
Well, especially if we're kicking an issue down the road.
right.
Because it's real easy to say, I don't want to deal with it now, but I'll wait till the evaluation. Like I said, it shouldn't be a surprise, because the number one, the employee deserves the respect of someone coming and saying, this is not happening correctly.
Right.
And it shouldn't be something that's done once a year. So
Yes, dealing with it when it's happening head on. And I appreciate you coming in.
And thank you. And I do think that's important for our county, because when we can set the performance standards and have clear position descriptions, and if we can evaluate and document throughout the course of the year, then you can give that written feedback. You can even establish some performance improvement plans to help that person, if they're not meeting it, to meet it before the end of the year. And so I think that's important for our county.
one of the things that I didn't mention before is you can, depending upon how the positions work, decide whether or not you're going to use them for all positions, or there may be more parts of the county where it's more effective to use a more formal process than an informal process. But that's also within your discretion. The key is going to be making sure we've got the documentation and we're being consistent about the way we're doing it.
Absolutely. We thank you so much. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I guess what we'll do is we'll put something together, try and have it by the next meeting, maybe not, maybe the meeting after,
Okay.
trying to figure out what
Right.
training is available, how much it's going to cost the county to put our people through the training, what the program evaluation itself looks like, and then bring it before the board as an action item.
Okay, sound like a good thing. Okay. All right, thank you. Again, thank you very much. All right, and moving forward, we'll have the clerk's report.
I just want to say on the evaluations, I found out many years ago when I was in a state type system in Clay County, and it's the same thing. You have to sit down with your boss. You don't sit down. I became a boss. And I just thought to myself, these are the most worthless things in the world. And after I became started, I had 18 people had to fill out weekly notes every week on 18 people. And Scott Lancaster walked by my office one day and I had a stack of files. Everybody had an inch paper in their file. He goes, Denny, how you like those evals? I said, "Ooh," I said, "it's rough. It's rough keeping up with all this." He said, "It's not for the employees. It's for the supervisors, for them to see how weak their supervisors were in different areas." Because they would see that one supervisor would have all exceeds, but they would know there were problems on that shift or that area. And they used it 90%. He told me this out of his mouth. It's 90% to evaluate all the supervisors and 10% for the employees.
Wow,
I thought that was pretty neat.
that's interesting.
But on another note, you guys have asked me about millage a couple of times, and you have to, a mill right now is $1.2 million, like 1.15, and you know that's going to cancel. You've talked about backing the millage out whenever you do some type of assessment. So it's going to take 3.5 mills just to get us back to zero almost where we're at now, and then decide how many mills to back out from the assessment. So that's going to be a lot of work to sort that out and give you guys a number where we can get back in a savings mode instead of a spending mode in the near future. And that's it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And that's important for our board to know, because we're looking at how we can monitor, our spending and our budget to make sure we stay within that budget, and to have some contingency funds available to take care of emergencies, of those catastrophic things that might occur. Really, thank you. From our sheriff.
Couple of things. My major, I went to the National Sheriff's Conference. I left on Sunday afternoon, meeting with some fellow sheriffs. I was introduced to some information that I was not aware of pertaining to our jail and inmates that we house. Under the Obama Affordable Health Care Act, there's a section in there, if you're a sentenced inmate, can't use it. So I've got to talking to another sheriff from another state, and then he gave me a contact with a vendor. I sent that information on Monday to Major Don McKinley at the jail. Some things appear to be too good to be true, and I thought this was one of those. I just kind of blew it off. I said, yeah, there's the information. I heard this, but it piqued my curiosity. We need to look into it. Initially, both kind of thought the same in our conversation. One of the vendors that we knew that we trust said, oh, no, it's working. You need to we got a couple places in Florida. So the Health Cred Care is a couple of lawyers that went together, and they formed this. They get something out of it for registering people, and no cost to us. They sent her a laptop. As I speak this morning, every inmate in our county, inmate in our jail, except for 3 at this moment, now have health care coverage. Now, that's a substantial savings to us in Bradford County. Not only do they have health insurance, when they get out, because of the thresholds, they have health insurance. That allows us to pay for local medication. We're not having to go to an outside vendor, shop local, as we like to say. That puts some more controls. If they have the health insurance, we can bill them through our rescue that now does that service for free. There's a lot of options that opened up, and I want to give kudos to Major McKinley, because I kind of, I was asked about it. We talked to this vendor that I know and trust, and he looked out for us, and he sent it to us immediately. She's got the laptop, and now they have health insurance coverage, not only while they're in jail, but when they get out, because the law states you must charge their health insurance first under the Affordable Care Act. So I thought that's substantial. That could save us a couple. It only takes one inmate to bankrupt us each year. The clerk can tell you that we pay for catastrophic insurance when it goes above $30,000 or $40,000. They cover it, but most inmates fall between that $15,000 and $25,000. So we're paying that out. One cancer patient like to ruin us one year. We went to the catastrophic insurance, which cost us around $75,000 a year to purchase. So I'm in awe this morning. As I sat with her this morning in that meeting, I thought I'd bring that to the board, that y'all needed to know. And that's not my behalf, because I kind of half-heartedly took that over some sweet tea on a Sunday afternoon. But it did pique my interest. And that's a big thing. Now we talk about rescue and first responders and those type things. We're going to set out on a mission to do you a call analysis. We did that years ago. We need to know where the most calls for service that we respond to in this county. I think that's only fair to you, the Board of County Commissioners. We did it one time before. I think Commissioner Riddick can attest to it. That's the reason the living quarters went to Theresa and not to the Keystone Fire Station at that time, because the call analysis showed where the majority of the calls go. We'll get you that. So we're going to work on that. Don't know how fast we can get it. We're working with our IT people to see how they can sort those calls, whether they're fire, EMS calls, those type things. I think it's only fair, and it's fair to show the public.
Okay.
So I think y'all are owed that. The second is a dashboard. What fire rescue is doing is we are working. If you walk in our lobby right now, I've got it on my phone. Major McKinley's watching this live. She's a little bashful, but she's watching this live, and she's been, so I'm making sure I give all the information. Shop local. When they get out, they got health insurance. But a dashboard will look something, and I've only got it on my phone. If you walk into our lobby, you'll see a big real-time CAD incidents. So it tells us, today 41, this week 602, this month 4,052. This year we've had 21,188 calls. Last year 42,585. How many traffic stops, arrests? This week 19, this month 105, this year 569, last year 1,003. It'll be a real live dash that they can put on our county website, but we're going to do one for the fire as well. So we're working with the software company to kind of give you all those calls that anybody can look up and see right now at the moment what's taking place in this county.
Wonderful.
If we have the technology to do it, the public should have access to it. So I've been working with the county manager, fire chief. We're trying to come up with something be a little red and black like their stuff with their logo, ours separate. We use the same software, and we had to buy another piece of equipment that blocks the public from getting, when we put it live on the internet, that keeps it from getting access to the CGIS, FCIC, NCIC, and we had to purchase some more equipment, which we're doing in regards to it. So that's kind of an update where we're at with the sheriff's office. I thought the jail information could save us, as some have mentioned, finding another way of budgeting. I'm still amazed. I'm a big smile on my face when I walked out of the day, and she's texting me the entire time to make sure I say certain things. So I'm checking so I don't get in trouble when I go back. But those are some of the things that we think you're deserved to know where the most calls go to, and so when your citizens approach you and say, hey, what about, because I know Brooker wants a fire department, but I've already heard a city commissioner from Hampton say, well, what about us getting a fire department? You get into all those battles. We need to know where the calls are, where we're sending our public safety responders, first responders, and I just think you're owed that. And then the real-time data, if we have it, let's show it. So thank y'all.
And Sheriff, and thank you and Major McKinley for that good news that uplift the burden of a lot of expenditures. Do you know
Reentry program, which is great. We can buy local again for meds. I mean, it gives us a lot of access.
Do you know off the top about how much we spend annually in healthcare for the inmates?
We spend somewhere near in the neighborhood, and we don't have to pay for the federal inmates we house, which is good. Matter of fact, she's even introduced this program to them, and they're looking it up to forward it to Washington. Oh, I forgot. She's also reapplied for the amount that we get for housing federal inmates. We've crossed that threshold that we can reapply to get an increase in that as well. But right now, we're currently spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 to $500,000 a year.
Okay, thank you.
That's to take care of the inmates when they're in our custody.
Very good. That's a tremendous savings.
And our reentry, when they get out, they've got health insurance, so it's a big help.
Thank you very much. Okay. And our county manager's report, Mr. Cornegie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I think I would like to ask Mr. Dodds to come up and talk about the road management tech reviews. We told you at the last meeting that we would reach out to some references and give you some more information before we move forward with contracting with them.
Good morning.
Good morning.
At the last meeting, Road Management Technologies presented before the board on their system for us tracking our road data. And y'all had asked if I would go out and talk to some references. And I did get a hold of some of the references who emailed me back, and you'll see them before you. So just wanted to follow back up on that with you.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I was talking to Jimmy Williams last night at dinner. I ran into him from Lake Butler, and he said that the University of Florida State Materials Testing Lab has that equipment and go out to the counties around here. He said that they've offered it to him. He claims he's got a number I can call. But
I've got the same number. They actually test the state infrastructure, and when they have time,
okay.
and it's basically more of a friction test that they do, but they do some data, roadway stuff.
He didn't know a lot about it. I was just want to check, make sure it wasn't the same thing.
One of my best friends does that.
Okay.
And Mr. Dawson, when we were at the FSC, then I was also trying to check to see if DOT had a particular methodology that they used, or technique or instruments or whatever. And so the person gave me her card, and she's going to get back with us about what they use, and to see if that's something that the county could use as well. And I'll get that information to you as well.
And one of the things I like about this, and one of the references actually spoke on it, if we would have had this in place when the bypass was being built, we would have had the data ourselves to show the state how deteriorated Southwest County Road 18 and 227 was after, and then had the information from before all the truck traffic. So we could have potentially used that to get the funding to redo that road. And it's also, I checked with the county attorney, it is also able to be purchased or paid for out of our gas tax, if you choose to go that route.
All right. Thank you. Any questions about the road technology program?
That was 50,000 annually.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Madam Chair, would you like for us to put it on the next agenda as an action item?
For me, I would still like to just explore if there's any other programs before we take action on it. If there's any other, I don't know.
Well, I think, Jason, you've reached out to a number of vendors, right?
Yes, there is several vendors that do this similar thing, but their cost was not near as acceptable as this was.
Okay.
And this, what we ended up at was not the original quote they gave us. We negotiated with them multiple times to get it to this number. It was quite a bit higher than that in the original quote.
Okay. Could you just hold off on the next one and put it on the next one after that?
Sure.
Okay, and then that way I can get you that information, or the person that we saw at FACT, just to see if there's any others that we can consider before we make a decision on this one, to see if, what technology they may be using.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I concur, having some kind of apparatus that would evaluate the condition of the road is important for us. But if there's any avenues to get it with a lesser cost, we can explore that before we make the final decision on this one. That's all I'm asking.
Yes, ma'am, and I completely understand. I will just say that what you're talking about right now is a one-time overrun of our roads, not a consistent every day, where this would be tracking every day off of our sheriff's office vehicles, off of our public works vehicles, off of our fire rescue vehicles that are seeing every inch of our county, weekly. But I'll go any direction y'all want to go.
Okay.
So they put it on their vehicles as well?
Yes, ma'am.
All county-owned vehicles.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So if we can just move it to the agenda, I guess would be the first one in August then.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
all right. And while you're up, can you give us, or you may not have had the time because you were at the meetings too, the update on the road progress project that they're doing in our different parts of the community?
Yes, ma'am. So we are actually working toward placing the lime rock down because we had some unraveling with the milling that we couldn't hold bond together. So the chip seal was going to fail. So we've just about finished all of the roads in the northeast and are moving toward the southeast and should complete those probably in 2 weeks. But we're going to go ahead and move the chip seal folks back in, hopefully after the 4th of July weekend, and get them up on that part getting started while we're continuing to work forward.
Okay. And then one other thing to bug you with, we've been getting a lot of calls about the roadside mowing. And so are you able to get any extra help with that piece? I had a gentleman literally stop by yesterday at my house. He came to the back garage and says, 17th Loop in Laude, it hasn't been mowed in ages or whatever. So is there any help, extra help that you can get?
No, ma'am, I wouldn't consider anything extra help. And I'm not hiding any employees. I promise you, they're all out doing lime rock on roads right now.
No, I meant, can we employ any temporary help to help them? I guess is what I'm asking. Not that you have people that are not doing, you're doing everything that you can
Yes,
within the limited employee numbers that you have. Is there any way that we can get help from anybody else? I don't know, through Department of Corrections, inmates, or whomever, to help us to kind of catch up some before the storm.
We are using inmate work crews right now. Unfortunately, we're getting about 3 to 5 a day is the max on it.
Jason, how many employees do you have?
Out on the roadway, I have 12. And that's to run 3 graders, 2 mowing tractors, and then whatever else we can do with them.
How many road miles do you have to maintain?
330 miles. But when you consider mowing, you take the Southwest County Road 231, you mow it 8 passes by the time you mow both sides from right away to the edge of pavement. So it's a lot more than 330 miles.
Yeah.
8 times more.
Yes, sir.
And that is no criticism, Mr. Dahl. He is the finest, and his employees are doing the best. But we're just at a position now where everything is just overgrown. No fault of theirs, but just seeking if there are any alternative that we have that can help them out, to kind of catch up on some of it. Is what I was asking.
Have you ever checked into contract mowing? I don't know what it costs per mile.
So I did, clerk, the last time, well, it was probably 2019 when I did it. We needed tractors because we didn't have none that ran. And so a couple of the commissioners had asked me to check on contract mowing, and without litter in it, just mowing was $80,000 per cycle through the county.
What's the cycle?
That's a month, or?
That's one trip around the county was 80,000.
Okay.
It's how much?
80,000, and that was back in 2019. So I would go ahead and say we could triple that for 2024.
May I make one comment? And this is just to brag on the sheriff and the sheriff's department, and it goes along with the roads. Unfortunately, on Southeast 11th, the reason the road kept coming unraveled is our road department was down there working as hard as they could work. And at night, and even before they even finish up, four-wheelers and side-by-sides were coming in there and spinning donuts all the way down the road. And I'll tell you, I have nothing against four-wheelers or side-by-sides or race bikes. I've got all of them. But you don't tear up the roads. And from talking with the sheriff and the sheriff department, we don't even care if they ride on the road. But don't tear up the road. You can go into the woods and ride just as fast as you want, and I do it all the time myself, but I don't tear up the road. And Sheriff, I just thank you so much. I mean, I met the deputies down there, I don't know how many times already. We've already caught 2 of them. And but the thing is, the word needs to get out that if we catch them spinning donuts, they're going to get a citation, and it's going to cost them. Because our road department, it was making me sick, and I was getting calls constantly. And Mr. Cornegay knows, because I was calling him too about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And but But we just need to really get the word out. We don't care if they ride on the dirt road to get to the woods to tear up whatever they want, but don't tear up our roads. And, because like I said, it's costing the county, it's costing us a lot of money. And, I don't know for sure, but it might have cost us having to put all this extra lime rock on Southeast 11th because they had it packed, they had it watered, and the next morning it was tore all to pieces. So,
What
I
a shame.
just wanted to throw that out there. And again, Sheriff, I thank you so much. Your deputies are fantastic. And but I was also out there with them with some pretty mad parents that came by because we pulled their poor little sons and daughters over. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. But okay, but thank you. I do appreciate it.
You know, I'm responsible for training them deputies, right? Sorry, Sheriff.
Yeah. Mr. Doss, thank you for all that you do in the road department. You guys do a fantastic job with just a limited number of employees. And so if there's any way or anything that we can do to help you, I just want us to do it, to help out.
Yes, ma'am. And that credit goes to my staff because they have that never quit attitude, and we'll do whatever needs to be done.
Sheriff, can you work on trying to help us get some more inmate help?
Why they run over that trash? Well, look, we picked it up yesterday, but they came by today with another load, throw it out back of the truck or the trailer, and so it down, it takes them over to get it, it looks like a zoo. Those guys can't handle that. We work well. Right now, we finally got a little water.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd.
Yes, ma'am. Thank y'all.
Well, and I just want to say, Jason, thank you. I know I call you a lot. And because I do have a lot of dirt roads and everything, but I do appreciate everything you do. I hope you know that. And
Yes, ma'am.
Sheriff, thank you for getting those squads out. Are they cutting the numbers back on the inmates, or are we still getting full squads? Absolutely.
And we are assigned 10 of them, but when they have call outs and things like that, they don't.
Well, I wondered if there was something going on that may have
Yeah.
prevented them from being able to fill the squads.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
the chief deputy clerk was just pointing out that there may be another option where we could hire seasonal workers
Oh.
and pay for them out of the general fund.
Okay.
It would just be a matter of how much money you want to spend. And I'm assuming if we did that, we'd also have to purchase additional equipment, or no?
No, sir. We're fine on equipment. We just need labor,
We need
personnel.
labor.
Yes. So if we can just do that just for the summer, just to help out, just to catch up, because it's not just my district. I mean, it's the whole county. I mean, if you drive through any road at any time, the grass is 3 or 4 feet. And it's not because they're not doing their job, but by the time they get from one end and to the other, it's back up.
The thing with that too was that it was drought for a long time, and just
Right.
grass has sprouted last week.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
come from nothing to hay.
Okay. So if we could, yeah,
Take a look at
okay,
seasonal workers and
Yeah.
what it would cost us. And
okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Jason. The next thing I have is, several of you have inquired recently about the impact fees and where we are in that process. So I wanted to go on the record today and say that we talked to the consultant at Stantec, and they confirmed that they'll begin working on the impact fee methodology once the fire assessment is completed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carnegie.
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you for being here with us. At this time, Commissioner comments? Ms.
Well,
Andrews?
it's been a very, very vocal meeting, so I really brought out everything that I had to discuss, other than just thank you for all being here and taking a true interest in our county and what's going on, the changes that may need to be made, and working with us, talking to us, and letting us hear how you feel, making suggestions that honestly may help us. So thank y'all for being here. Appreciate it.
Okay. Commissioner Reddy?
Yes, I thank everyone for being here. Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Taylor. That was awesome. Thank you. Good information. And also just remember the 4th of July. I mean, that's why we live in this great nation. And but don't forget the men and women in the military that are out there that won't be able to sit back and eat the hamburgers and hot dogs and watch the fireworks because they're stationed somewhere, and so that we can enjoy this freedom that we have. So anyway, excuse me. But anyway, just think about our men and women in uniform on the 4th of July. And I hope everybody has a happy and safe 4th, and looking forward to the next meeting.
Okay. Again, and I'd like to thank you all for being here too. And my question, I think Mr. Wood has already answered that. But are we prepared for the storms? Was one of my areas. And then also the sheriff, and I know Mr. Carnegie you all were going to try to identify some cooling areas as the heat index increases, that we have some safe places so people can just be able to cool down.
Yes, ma'am, and we'll do that. For the last 2 weeks, he and I both have been at conferences and one thing or another, so
Yeah.
we hadn't had an opportunity to put our heads together with that, but we will.
Okay, and the other, Mr. Dawes' address, and if we can get somebody to the Northeast 17th Loop in Laurie to just try to get their 5-foot ditches done, that would be very, very, very helpful. And then I wanted to thank the board and our county for allowing us to go to the FACT conference, and we're so grateful to have some representatives here. It was a very informative meeting. And then I'd like to acknowledge Commissioner Andrews received her plaque and graduation ceremony, so she's now level 2 county certified manager as well, and we're so grateful for that. And there we have the 4th of July festivities coming up on Thursday. There will be the parade and then the activities at the fairground. Let's go and support those activities. And I know, Sheriff, you had something coming up in mid-July. What was that? There's another activity that's coming up that we got an email on.
Call Major McKinley.
Okay, that's okay. And I believe Mr. Heater is in charge of the activities at the 4th and the 5th, I believe. And so let's support that. And
May I say one more thing, Madam
yes,
Chair?
absolutely.
So since they're here, and I rarely get to say publicly and to thank and tell them how much we appreciate what they do for us, Denise Vogelsang with FACT and FMIT, not only do they provide our insurance and other things for us, but they provide training. We just had a recent training at the Charlie Johns, and it was absolutely wonderful. And we get so much value from that relationship with Denise and her organization, not to mention the Krisner Group and what they do for us in terms of human resources and policies surrounding that. So thank you, Denise. We appreciate you. We appreciate your organization. And Mr. Taylor, same thing for the Krisner Group. We appreciate you.
Okay. All right. Anything else from anybody for the good of the order? If nothing more, this meeting is adjourned, 11:34. Thank you.